When Joanna Walton drives up in this silver car, almost immediately, this red SUV pulls out of a nearby carport and drives over to where Walton's parked. 2 minutes later, you can hear several faint pops, witnesses say were gunshots. The red SUVs then seen reversing. It remains on the scene for about 30 seconds before driving away. During that time, a witness says the shooter peered through the open back window of the victim's car before returning to his SUV.
He gets out of the car first. That's the part that should stop you. Not the 11 shots. Not the parking lot in League City. It's that after all of it, after the windshield and the screaming and the silence that comes right after, he steps out of his SUV, walks back to her window, and looks in. 30 seconds. That's how long he stands there. Long enough to make sure. Long enough that you have to ask yourself, what kind of person does that? Rage doesn't do that. Rage runs. This was something else. Something closer to a man finishing a job he'd already decided on a long time ago. And that's the question I want you sitting with for the rest of this video. Not who did this. We know who did this. The question is, what turns a person into someone who can check his work after killing the mother of his child? Because the answer isn't sudden. It took years. And somewhere in those years, at least 3 different people had the paperwork in their hands to stop it. Her name was Joanna Walton, 37 years old, a mom, first and foremost, to a big blended family, 7 kids between her and the people she loved. She lived at the Harbor Walk Apartments, and if you'd met her in the last year of her life, you'd have met a woman who was, by every account, trying to rebuild. She'd gotten out of a relationship. She was raising her kids. She thought that chapter was closed. It wasn't. Isaiah Johnson didn't think it was closed either. They shared a son together, and for a while, that was the thread that kept them connected, the reason he still had access to her life. But somewhere along the way, access turned into obsession. And in 2023, that obsession turned into something you don't walk back from. Johnson pointed a gun at Joanna and pulled the trigger. It jammed. So he used it as a club instead, beating her with the weapon that had just failed to kill her. Think about that for a second. The gun failing wasn't mercy. It was an inconvenience. He adjusted and kept going. Here's where it gets really interesting, and not in a good way. Johnson pleaded guilty, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and for pointing a gun at a woman's head and then beating her when it misfired, he got 30 days in jail. 30 days, and 10 years of probation. 10 years to prove the system was watching him. You'll want to remember that number, because it comes back later, and it does not come back kindly. If you've ever had a gut feeling about someone that everyone around you brushed off, tell me in the comments, because that instinct matters more than people give it credit for. And if this story is already sitting heavy on your chest, hit subscribe now, because I'm going to give you 2 safety tips later in this video that could genuinely make a difference if you or someone you love is living through something like this. Stick around for that. It's coming, and it's worth the wait. For now, just know this. The warning shots were already fired, literally, in 2023. Nobody listened. And the next time Isaiah Johnson escalated, it would not be a warning. Welcome to True Crime Footprint, where we unveil the darkest mysteries and the most terrifying true crime tales. Kindly hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss any of our new stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. By July 2025, Isaiah Johnson was still on probation, still supposed to be proving he'd changed. Instead, he broke into Joanna's apartment. Think about what that means for a second. Not a call, not a text. He forced his way into the home of a woman he'd already tried to kill, and when he was done, he started texting her. I'm not going to read you every line, because some of them don't need repeating word for word, but I'll tell you the shape of them. He told her he didn't care if he threw his life away, as long as their son never saw her again. Read that twice. That's not anger talking. That's a man telling you exactly what he's willing to lose to get what he wants. When someone says that out loud, believe them. Then came the part that tells you who you're really dealing with. He brought up the beating from 2023, and he told her how beautiful she looked, crying with blood on her face. That's not a temper, that's enjoyment. And in every risk assessment used by people who study domestic violence for a living, that combination, no fear of consequences plus pleasure in her pain, sits at the very top of the list for who is most likely to kill. Galveston County took it seriously enough to issue a felony warrant for burglary in August 2025. On paper, that should have ended things fast. A judge signs it, police pick him up, probation gets revoked, done. But here's where it gets really interesting. That warrant sat untouched for 11 months. 11 months where Isaiah Johnson walked around free, knowing exactly what he'd said to her, knowing there was already a warrant with his name on it. And somehow, nobody came for him. Why? That's the part we need to talk about next. Because the answer isn't one bad cop or one lazy office. It's something built into the system itself, and it's going to make you angry. Here's the part that's honestly hard to explain without sounding like I'm making it up. Isaiah Johnson lived in Magnolia, which put him under Harris County for probation supervision. But the warrant for burglary came out of Galveston County, where the crime actually happened. 2 different counties, 2 different systems, and apparently 2 systems that don't talk to each other. Harris County later told journalists they were never notified that Galveston County had issued a warrant for their own probationer. Let that sink in. The people responsible for watching Johnson month to month had no idea he was wanted for a felony. He kept showing up to his check-ins, kept getting signed off, kept walking out the door a free man. When reporters asked Galveston County if they'd ever told Harris County about the warrant, the response was silence. No comment. This is the part where those 2 safety tips come in. Because if you or someone you know is dealing with an abusive ex who's out on probation or has an active case, here's what actually helps. First, don't assume the system is tracking anything for you. Call the court clerk yourself and ask directly if there's an active warrant, and get it in writing or on record that you asked. Second, if you're in a different county than your abuser's probation office, request that a copy of any protective order or warrant be sent directly to that specific probation department, by name, not just filed generally. Paperwork sitting in the right building does nothing if it never reaches the right desk. If this video is teaching you something you didn't know you needed, that's exactly why I do this. Subscribing means you won't miss the next story that might actually help someone you love. Because for Joanna, none of this got fixed in time, and June 29, 2026 was coming whether the paperwork moved or not.
Man is accused of gunning down a woman in League City, and her family says he harassed her for years. In fact, court records show Isaiah Johnson was out on probation for beating Joanna Walton over the head with a gun. ABC 13's Luke Jones has a closer look at the troubled history and new video showing what happened.
It's just after 2 p.m. Monday at the Harbor Walk Apartments on FM 518 when Joanna Walton drives up in this silver car. Almost immediately, this red SUV pulls out of a nearby carport and drives over to where Walton's parked. 2 minutes later, you can hear several faint pops. Witnesses say were gunshots. The red SUVs then seen reversing. It remains on the scene for about 30 seconds before driving away. During that time, a witness says the shooter peered through the open back window of the victim's car before returning to his SUV. League City police say 38-year-old Isaiah Johnson turned himself in to the Galveston Police Department about 2 hours later.
Are you requesting a court-appointed attorney?
Yes.
Johnson's bond set at $360,000 during a court hearing this morning. According to court documents, he and the victim share a son together. Joanna Walton's family says he's been harassing her for years following their breakup. In 2023, police say he tried to shoot her, but when the gun jammed, pistol whipped her instead. Records show he pleaded guilty and got 30 days in jail and 10 years probation. He was also required to complete a battering intervention program. But last July, while still on probation, police say Johnson broke into Walton's apartment. An affidavit detailing a string of messages he's accused of texting her, including that he doesn't want their son to see her again, and quote, "I don't care if I throw away my life to make that happen. Also, your face was so beautiful with all that blood coming down, and you crying." Police issued a warrant for his arrest for the burglary, but it wasn't served until he turned himself in on the murder charge. The victim's mother and sister back home in Amarillo, when we spoke with them on the phone earlier, they're frustrated with how that assault case was handled back in 2023. They say probation didn't go far enough. This time around, they're hoping Johnson faces stiffer consequences.
Monday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Joanna pulls her silver Toyota Corolla into the lot at Harbor Walk Apartments, the same complex she called home. Isaiah Johnson was already there. He'd parked his red SUV inside a carport nearby, out of the way, waiting. The moment her car pulled into its spot, his SUV moved. At 2:02, people nearby heard what they described as faint popping sounds. 11 of them. Johnson walked up to her driver's side window and fired every one of those rounds into the car. Then he did the part we started with. He backed up, he paused. He got out, walked to her window, and looked in to make sure it was done. 30 seconds. Then he got back in his SUV and drove away, like a man leaving a task completed. Police arrived at 2:25 and found Joanna Walton behind the wheel of her car. She was gone. 2 hours later, Johnson turned himself in at the Galveston Police Department. He was charged with murder. Bond was set the next day at $360,000. And that burglary warrant, the one that had been sitting untouched for 11 months, was finally served after he was already in custody for her murder. 11 months of paperwork, and it took her death to move it. To Joanna's family, to her children, to everyone who loved her, I'm so sorry for your loss. No story, no warning sign, no lesson learned after the fact brings her back. Thank you for watching this to the end, and I'll see you in our next true crime story. To everyone who made it to the end, thank you for watching, for your attention, and for joining us on this journey of reflection. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and above all, stay safe. See you on our next video.